who would have thought that with Back to the Future 2, you essentially predicted the situation we're in right now with Biff and Donald Trump?
We didn't have, no. We never were audacious enough to think that even Biff would run for president. We didn't even go, no one would have believed it. We couldn't have put that in the movie.
And yet here we are.
President Trump. When Back to the Future Part 2 was released, businessman Donald Trump had accrued a certain measure of success, but he was mostly known to people in the New York area. Most of them watched the movie without ever suspecting that the future version of Biff, who uses his ill-gotten wealth to build a casino empire that serves as a springboard into political power, was based on the mogul. In an interview with the Daily Beast in 2015, the movie's writer, Bob Gale, explained his intentions. Quote, "We thought about it when we made the movie. There's a scene where Marty confronts Biff in his office, and there's a huge portrait of Biff on the wall standing behind Biff. And there's one moment where Biff kind of stands up and he takes exactly the same pose as the portrait.
Now you see that, again, there's a concern for AI being basically handled by China. So because AI is capable of doing so many different things, that what people do with it, how it's done, what software is being used to do it, all will possibly be handled by China, is what is the concern, because it's already happening, and they've already named countries that it's happening. Now, since COVID-19, there's now been new adoptions. We don't even understand who is the owner of the system that was deployed inside of Australia just recently with the COVID tracking. Also, the tests itself are like a hard-coded census, meaning that when a person comes in and they get tested for this, they take the DNA, and then now this goes into like open databases because they're already trying to get that data, and I'm going to show you why here in a moment. But it's a last-ditch effort for the Western countries around the world to say, shut everything down, shut the border. Shut the border, because we're able to accomplish a couple things when we shut borders. Anybody who's not from there, get out. And if you're from here, get back here now. Okay, we got everybody here. Okay, so all the computers, all number systems from the airline flights and everything, they're counting. How many people do we really have that are really with us? And let's get the DNA and let's get everything else too. You see what I mean? So there's a lot of reasons why all this data is being collected, because they need hard numbers. AI needs hard numbers. It doesn't need fictitious numbers. It doesn't need likes and subscribes that come from bots. It needs real numbers to make real assessments. And this is what this all is a part of, with getting the data in alignment and getting the data needed. This is why there's been a lot of canceling of certain certification processes from the USDA to other different places. There's no longer, as Trump has said, processes that you need to go through in order to get drugs approved and do certain things. All those regulations, though, have nothing to do with what most people think about it. Oh, now because they're going to do this and they're going to shoot us up with this and do this. This is about big data. This is about AI, because there is a race that is already being lost.
Also want to talk about the severe economic damage that Stephen Mnuchin, that was a direct quote, said that the United States of America would have if himself and Donald Trump and our officials did not reopen up the economy. Because if he doesn't open up the economy soon, and he is starting to open up the economy, albeit with a lot of restrictions. For example, retail shops are opening up here where I am on Monday, so tomorrow. But there's all these restrictions. You've got to wear a mask. You can't go in with any kids. You got to be in and out. You can't have any fun. You're not allowed to do anything like go to a playground or really do anything that's fun. All the arcades are closed, movie theaters, all the gyms are closed, etc. So there's this haphazard reopening up of the economy for a couple of reasons. Stephen Mnuchin is right. If they don't open things up, then we're going to have a total economic collapse, which I think that's already on the table. And we could have permanent, long-term economic damage here in the United States. Permanent destruction of the dollar. Permanent destruction of your job tuning in. Permanent destruction of your retirement. I mean, these are his words: your retirement account, your savings, all these kinds of things. Also, Donald Trump, politically speaking, if he doesn't open things up, he's not going to win the U.S. election. he's going to have no chance to win his reelection if he doesn't open up the economy. Because I don't care how much of a tried and true, dire to the end time supporter you are, Donald Trump, the longer you close the country, even if that's for our own good, and it very much might well be, if you can't go to work, you can't make money, you can't feed your family, you're not going to win.
So look, the article spin. China's next target is the microchip hegemony. Okay, so what this is about is that there's really only one thing right now that is still the what do you call that? I guess the control point, like the actual control point in all this. It happens to do with the production of advanced silicone. It happens to do with how, as you see, now we got a new Pentium i9 processor that's being released to us, okay? So every time there's an upgrading in the processor, you'll notice the processors generally stay the same size. So how can something be upgraded but be the same size? And it's because the technology that's used to build the infrastructure and the framework is predominantly being done still in Japan. And because Japan is still aligned with the Western countries, technically the Western countries still have dominance over the manufacturing of chips. And they also have extra secret sauce with how their chips are being developed and how they're advancing the chips. They're probably getting that from AWAS himself, just to stay one more step ahead and keep the war going. But look at this. It says ZTE, and you see some articles there, but it says the ZTE, the cautionary tale of semiconductor import dependency. And I'm not going to read this because it's kind of convoluted the way that it reads, but specifically what it's talking about is what happens, though, is when we identify where we still have some power as a country, we still have power because we're making the chips. Then somebody tries to use that, generally in the powers, in the government offices and all this kind of stuff. They'll try to use that as like a bargaining chip. So what this is explaining is that the company ZTE was apparently making chips, and they were basically sanctioned. They know you can no longer make any chips for United States, blah, blah, blah. This caused the company to go under. And in that, China came to the sober realization that, hey, we're still depending on them for chips. We need to make our own chips. We need to keep pursuing the possibility of us making our own chips. And they talked about how this also kind of pushed them a bit closer with Taiwan. And this is another thing. Again, if you don't know geopolitics or any of that, you got China or mainland China, you got Taiwan, and you got Hong Kong, all claiming to be China, but all hate each other because of the dissensions that have gone on in there. I think actually Taiwan and Hong Kong may be a bit more closer to each other. But when we say China, this is also why, because this could get very confusing to you. You could say, well, how is this possible? Because I'm seeing threads where many of the companies and corporations that we're dealing with are actually dealing with the Chinese. Wait a minute. Is it Taiwan, Hong Kong, or mainland? Because those are different things. And somebody not knowing about the political landscape will make that, it's just like the ignorance. It's like, oh, all the Chinese, they're all Chinese. No, I got checked hard one time where I told one guy who was Chinese, and I was like, hey, man, you're from China. And he said, I'm not from China, I'm from Hong Kong. I was like, damn.
There's a second wave that comes next. I can only imagine how much more perverse and worse things are about to get. Now, I reported yesterday 11 of Donald Trump's Secret Service members are infected. Staffers are infected. Mike Pence staffers infected. In addition to that, the valet driver of Donald Trump is infected. I was pointing out yesterday, I don't know what you guys think about this, but I think there's some truth to it. What if you tuning in are the virus? You thought about that for a moment? What if you tuning in are the virus? Have you thought about that? Right? You see in movies, in fiction, it's the people, it's populations, it's you. Think about this for a minute. You're the invisible enemy. Have you thought about that? Because I think there might be some truth to that. What is certain is this entire world is changing. Absolutely everything is changing. We are in the equivalent, and I think there's so much normalcy bias right now. I don't know about you guys, but there's so much normalcy bias and no frame of reference because none of us, including myself, have lived through a Great Depression. None of us. And that's what I think we're living through. And so people think that we're going to go back like immediately to a V-shaped recovery, like everything's suddenly going to be fine, because there's no frame of reference of how painful, long, and dire the consequences with permanent economic damage that Stephen Mnuchin is warning about that could last for a generation and culminate in many other problems. Global conflict. Notice the tensions are rising in the South China Sea right now. We're seeing more and more reports that Donald Trump isn't getting along with the Chinese.
A national database purportedly contains over 1 billion faces of everyone over 18 within official ID. Okay? And I only have one thing that I'm highlighting here. The Chinese police has a data set of 40 million DNA samples that their official website boasts is the largest database in the world of its kind. So you can imagine when this goes to India, there's a couple articles here that I didn't actually include, but what happened is that even inside of India, all these technologies are being implemented rapidly. And 25% of the system that is inside of India, the cash system, the money system, was actually taken over by China, who introduced an app because people in India have these smartphones. They make smartphones in India. So they make the smartphone, they give them a smartphone, and then that becomes their bank. But there was an issue because also the taxes, they can now start collecting taxes. Most of the people in China weren't even paying taxes. So what was their solution? Let me show you something really briefly. So here's the big thing. You could be sitting back there like, okay, well, but how would they implement this stuff? How would it even look? And I would say that they're just focused on the solutions. However, many are kind of confused about how a society that we live in right now can all of a sudden be changed into something else. And I think we're starting to get an idea that that can happen overnight. And as I explained before, I have a recording. If somebody could ever find it and just send it back to me as clear proofs, I explained proficiently that the name of these beings, when I was doing some research, inside the cabals and inside of some of the spiritual groups, they had given themselves a name. And this name, when it translated into English, meant shocking, shock, that surprise, basically, that their technique, their power is to surprise people, basically to catch them off guard. And that their whole everything has been designed off of that principle. If you catch someone off guard, then they're not prepared. Like the Ronin says, I take your space, I take your time. This is a form of combat. Like if I take your space, if I decrease the distance between me and you, I take your time away to react. And then as even words like shock and awe or Shekinah actually are about very, very powerful things that can surprise a person in one moment. And that surprising, it brings either a complete awakening, a complete terror or horror or shock. You ever had that term and they say somebody's gone into shock? It's a real thing, right? Some people never think about that. Some people go into shock.
You need to be prepared. Your ability to make sound decisions and be of sound mind today is probably the most important thing that you could do in your life. Okay, I've been talking about this for days. You need to be seeking alternatives. What do I think is going to happen? I think we have about a couple more months of this false hope. And then I do think, I agree with the experts. I think there's going to be a second wave. I really do. And I think it'll potentially, God forbid, I'm praying it's not, but I think this might be the case, be far more deadly than what we've just seen. And I think this is why we should listen to our officials. It's why they've built all these hospitals. It's why they put those 2 large ships at our coasts. It's why they've been warning and warning over and over again. It's why they have us locked in our homes, because they're expecting something really bad.
Big bomb drop, boom, everybody goes into shock. Like nobody's even, what even happened? And it's almost like their consciousness leaves, at least for a moment. So their name means something, means that, shock. Okay, so this is where you get this, all of a sudden now everybody can get on a plane. Whoa, where did that come from? That's the shock. All of a sudden now we're going over there, we're going overseas. Shit, why are we going overseas? Now I'm coming off the plane as a young military private. It's like, whoa, what did I sign up for? The shock. Okay, so in that shock-like ability, in India, what happened is a big break came last year. They call it a big break, okay? I'm sure it wasn't a big break for the people who participated in it. A big break came last year when India canceled 86% of its currency in circulation in an effort to cut corruption and bring people more into the tax net. by forcing them to use less cash. Okay. So this is the emergence of the cashless society, which we've kind of been on the path on for a bit with Zero.com, PayPal.com, aka Skynet, and the rest of what goes on over there. The cashless society. And the predominant reason for this is just not to control every single transaction you make and every time you buy a Gucci purse and some Jordans and some lipstick. It's not about that. It's about scalability. You cannot scale money very well. This is the biggest problem that is being dealt with right now is how do we get this money into their hands? So now we got to go, let's go to this bank account, this old banking system. Oh my goodness, I just added an extra digit and I sent 10 million over there to, they had people coming in saying, hey, I got $80,000. Hey, I got $200 million in my bank account from the government. Oh yeah, we made a mistake. Let me put that back. You got companies even saying, well, look, we're already valuated at 120 million. We don't need this 10 million here. You can have it back. Oh, don't worry. You can keep it. It's free. So you have this messy, non-scalable system called cash that only has a number, which is not very proficient at keeping track of it, or systems that can actually keep track of it because it's never really bought back in a lot of times. So what this means is this cashless idea for them is like the dream because it really allows them to actually even soberly think that they can scale society. Because if you cannot scale cash, then you cannot implement the scale from cash, and you cannot implement artificially intelligent systems to do any kind of tracking because the actual form of finance and current cannot be tracked. And that's like the biggest thing to track. That's like the big, like if you have something doing formulas, this would be a huge gap open. It wouldn't be able to come up with the formulas because it wouldn't know how much money it was dealing with in the first place. So it wouldn't know how much it's saving, how much is really out there, none of that.
It's a company in Wisconsin offering employees microchips to replace ID badges. It's hosting a chip day party to implant the devices in the employees. And our guy Ron Mott is at the party. Hey, Ron, how is it?
Hey, Hoda and Matt, good morning to you both. You know, we all know people complain that their companies treat them like machines. Well, 3 Square Market is sticking it to their folks today using these needles. Now, let me show you first what this microchip looks like. It is about the size of a grain of basmati rice. So Patrick here is the CIO. Andy is a licensed body piercer. So let it rip. We're going to see this now.
I got it.
I can't look. I can't look. Needle is in. Chip is in.
Bingo.
Not very much blood at all. Patrick, how'd that feel?
Better than get my wisdom teeth out.
Okay, and you're still conscious.
Yeah, I'm great.
Melissa got chipped yesterday, but you had to be talked into doing this. How long did it take you to say yes to this?
I was a little hesitant at first, but I had 7 days to think about it. And once I learned the facts, there was no question in my mind.
Okay, one last thing we want to show you over here, Hoda and Matt. Go ahead, Steve. They can buy their goodies here in the break room by just using their hand. Real quickly, he's going to get a Kit Kat bar. And it's paid for $1.06, guys. So the question again, as we asked you last week, are you ready to be chipped, guys? Let's send it back to you.
Wow. I'm kind of I don't know that I would do it.
No?
Would you do it?
I don't, for the convenience of it,
Yeah.
maybe?
Maybe?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Not for a Kit Kat bar.
Maybe for Mercedes.
Maybe for a Klondike.
Yeah, exactly.
Certainly not a Kit Kat.
Ron, thanks. Hey, let's go to Dylan. Dylan's got more. You've been asking folks about it.
We've asked on Twitter, would you be willing to have a microchip implanted? And not surprisingly, 93% said no. What's wrong with this? It's easy to keep around.
Yeah. All right.
So that's why scalable cash is happening fast. You see, America's even talking about getting their own crypto now. The crypto markets, the halving is taking place. Bitcoin is splitting. $2,000 go up on Bitcoin goes up in 1 week. So there is a digital system that is coming, and it's coming fast. And it's to get things cashless to be able to scale the whole process of the integration of these technologies.
All right, I want to thank Mark Hathaway and many others who sent me the link to this Congress.gov HR House Resolution 6666. I mean, they say you can't make this up. You really can make it up, but why would you have to? Because our reality, the truth, is much stranger than fiction. I want to go to the PDF of this, and I want to show you an example of how this is going to play out. HR 6666, quadruple 6, to authorize the Secretary of Health and Human Services to award grants to eligible entities to conduct diagnostic testing for CV-19 and related activities such as contact tracing. Now remember, contact tracing is just a euphemism for Constitution trampling. They're going to come to your house to take away your rights to keep you safe, because we got to do this contact tracing and we got to do all this testing because we have to save people from CV-19.